Hi there! In the previous episode, you learned how sentient life appeared in the solar system. I have also told you who those beings were. We paused at the moment when an unknown fleet of ships unexpectedly approached the solar system. Today, you are going to find out who was aboard those ships. You will find out what trouble they brought with them. If this is your first time on this channel, please watch the video suggested in the upper right corner of your screen. You can find the link to it in the description under the video as well. It will help you understand what kind of content to expect from my channel. Also, I would like to kindly ask you to listen to the important information from the disclaimer that follows. If you already know the contents of the disclaimer, you can skip it right to the main part of the video. Look at the chapters bar at the bottom of the video and choose what you like. Here goes the disclaimer. The content of the videos on this channel is just my opinion. It is based on conclusions that I have made by studying world mythologies and religions. Experts and researchers of mythology with scientific degrees do not share my opinion. I do not claim to know the truth. My videos are not science. They are not intended to be educational either. If it makes you feel more comfortable, consider them a fantasy story. Before continuing, I must clarify something. This clarification will be even more useful if you have already done some research in mythology. There will be a distinct feature in all my videos. I will be mixing the names of mythological entities from different cultures in each story. If you hear me saying, Odin asked Enki to approach him, you don't have to think I'm confused. I do this intentionally. I want to show you that I see all the mythologies as one coherent picture. I could say, An asked Enki to come up, or Odin asked Loki to come up. For me, both of these sentences have the same meaning. I will intentionally mix these names together. My research has led me to believe that these are the same beings or entities under different names. Please remember this for the future. In the image displayed on your screen right now, you can see a chart. It contains the names of different mythological entities. I have used the names from Sumerian mythology as the main ones. The correspondence between those names is based on my research and my opinion. You do not have to agree with it. This is a short version of the table. Later I will prepare an expanded one. Now let's continue with the story. As it turned out, the ships were carrying refugees. They belonged to a race of sentient primates, or if you prefer, apes. They were fleeing the destruction of their species. That race possessed a very special ability. If they would have used it properly, they could prove very useful to other races of the inhabited universe. Unfortunately, the leaders of the sentient apes decided to use it solely for their own advantage and to the detriment of others. They used their gift to enslave other races without bloodshed. After conquering them, the primates forced those other races to work for them. From time to time, the sentient apes encountered beings on whom that ability did not work. The slave masters forced the enslaved to kill those they could not subdue. The killing of sentient beings was and still is unacceptable in the inhabited universe. The violation of peace and the right to free will did not go unnoticed by other races. They started an investigation and the culprits were quickly identified. The apes were offered to leave the inhabited worlds or face forced removal. That was an offer that the wrongdoers could not dismiss. Fortunately, the other races were kind enough to supply them with ships and with food for their long journey. The members of the sentient ape race had not done real work in a long while. Thus, they had quite a lot of things to learn before the spaceships were set in motion. There were no more slaves to do the work for them. When the fleet approached the solar system, It was in a pretty bad shape, and so were the passengers. The research group was not aware of the events surrounding the race. When they saw the state of the fleet, they immediately offered to help the travelers. The dwarves inspected the ships and repaired them. The elves set about building a renewable food supply. The Titans shared information about the nearest unpopulated worlds that might have been suitable for the unexpected guests. However, the leaders of the sentient apes had a change of heart. They liked the kind treatment and free service they received. They decided to extend their stay, pretending that their peers needed more time to recover. The primates chose to stay in the solar system and take advantage of the hospitality of the members of the research expedition. Soon after, Thea and her husband contacted their home world and learned details about their uninvited guests. What they learned appalled and disgusted them. The primates had managed to twist beyond recognition all the values considered universal in every inhabited world. Love, friendship, compassion, and unity were replaced by hatred, enmity, cruelty, and hostility. And then, an argument between the spouses happened. Apsu, Thea's spouse, wanted to equip the expelled ones as quickly as possible and send them away. Thea felt differently. The disagreement between the spouses extended over to the rest of the team. The Titans, or as the Scandinavians call them, the Jotnar, supported Apsu. The Vanir supported Thea. The other three races could not make up their minds and thus abstained. A standstill followed. The primates remained in the system. The sentient apes also have a name in mythology. Sumerians called them Igigi. In their myth about the creation of the human race, this name was repeatedly used. Upon learning of the risk of being expelled again, the Igigi decided to tip the scales in their favor. Their leaders had a lot of experience in influencing other sentient beings. They quickly identified the weak link in the research team. It was the Anunnaki, or Aesir, as Scandinavian mythology calls them. As I mentioned earlier, members of this race were extremely good at preserving order. At the same time, Thea, the leader of the expedition, was a very active person. She was constantly coming up with new ideas on what else could be modeled and tested. Every one of Thea's ideas led to an increase in workload for the Aesir. The Igigi decided to exploit that apparent conflict of natures. Their leaders got close with the three Aesir leaders. Once the sentient primates established tight relationships with the latter, they began to poison their thinking with negative thoughts, sowing the seeds of discord. Odin, who was one of the Aesir leaders at the time, proved to be the most susceptible to the new ideas. The influence had been so great that he decided to use one of the Igigi as his personal advisor. They've become inseparable. The name of the advisor, according to the Scandinavian mythology, was Mimir. As a result, after a short while, the Aesir sided with the Vanir on the matter of Igigi's presence in the system. For all the wrong reasons, of course. Most of the sentient primates settled on the fourth planet. A small group, made of the Igigi leaders and their entourage, stayed with the Aesir on the fifth planet. Although Asgard didn't suit them well because of its humidity, the primates didn't want to settle on the second planet with the elves. The elves lived in harmony with nature without things that today would be called the amenities of civilization. The guests were not allowed on the third planet due to the constant experiments conducted on flora and fauna. Those experiments were long-term, and any interference could affect the results. Determined to avoid annoying the owners of the system from the very start, the Igigi pretended they were making changes in attitude. Most of the sentient apes that settled on the fourth planet were unaware of the pretense. They believed the lie and truly began to change for the better. They even liked it. Unfortunately, Mimir and his supporters never forgot their intentions. Slowly, but surely, they poisoned the minds of the unsuspecting Aesir. After a while, resentment began to grow among the Watchers over their responsibilities. Eventually, it got to the point when some of the reptiles began calling Theia the embodiment of chaos. Her initiatives and her active nature became increasingly irritating to the lazy Aesir. Like the Igigi before the expulsion, the Anunnaki began to dream of idleness and indolence. Their close association with the primates began to turn the Aesir into parasites. Theia was immersed in her work, so she didn't keep track of what was going on in the system. She thought everyone was doing their job. She was wrong. It got to the point where some Anunnaki began sabotaging the work of their colleagues. That's exactly how the second great extinction occurred on the third planet. By failing to report on environmental changes in certain areas of the planet, the Aesir triggered a cascade of changes. As a result, much of the millennia-old work of Theia and her team was severely affected. Modern paleontologists call that event the Devonian extinction. When the investigation began, the Aesir claimed they had been given too much work to do. The unsuspecting leader of the expedition believed them and offered to discuss ways to make the Watcher's task easier. Her husband, on the other hand, did not believe the claim of error and began his own investigation. What he discovered shocked him. He summoned one of the Titans who had helped him with his investigation. According to the ancient Babylonian tablets of Enuma Elish, his name was Mumu. Together, they went to Theia with evidence and a demand to punish those responsible. Theia was unwilling to accept the truth and reprimanded both her husband and his helper for their harsh words. She could not believe that members of her team were capable of deliberately harming their colleagues. She became very upset that her partner and his assistant could talk about other team members in that way. Apsu did not give up and began to watch both Igigi and the Anunnaki even more closely. Mimir and his entourage had to slow down their divisive influence. Odin and the other two leaders got a break from mental poisoning. Unfortunately, the process of moral decay of the Aesir was already underway. Theia's spouse found it exhausting to work on his projects and watch over the two troubled races at the same time. He was getting very tired. Thus, he did not even notice when the leaders of the sentient primates began to work on increasing his level of irritation and frustration. Indirectly, through other members of the research team, they persisted adding to his emotional burden. Without even realizing it, the wise and powerful dragon was caught in the net of Igigi's mind games. That had a nefarious effect on the relationship between the leaders of the expedition. Apsu started avoiding Theia because he did not want to release all his frustration on her, and his spouse did not even notice it, being too busy with her projects. I'll make a break here today. If you want to know what happens next, and you are not subscribed yet, subscribe to the channel and click on the bell to be notified of new videos. If you liked it, click like and share with your friends and acquaintances. I welcome your questions in the comments. I'll be making videos with answers to the most popular questions. I wish you an eternal future in the vastness of the universe.
Beware, beware, the Dragonborns come. For the darkness is past and a legend yet.